one of the things that I have made a mistake about in the past that I just realized in the last couple of weeks was that, people often accuse me and they say, well, most of the people that listen to you are men. And I think, when you're accused like that, your automatic response is, well, you wouldn't be accused if you weren't doing something wrong. So there must be something wrong about that. It's like, why isn't it 50% women? And so I've said things like, well, 80% of the people who watch YouTube videos are men. And so the fact that 80% of the people who watch my videos are men isn't that surprising given that base rate. Then why is that all of a sudden supposed to be a bad thing? Psychologists have come to a pretty decent agreement about standard personality models, right? So there's extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, openness, and conscientiousness. And they look fairly stable cross-culturally. And that was all done by asking thousands of people hundreds and hundreds of questions and then grouping them statistically. So it was theoretical, basically. It took computational power and statistics to find out that these are how traits group. So extroverted people are sociable and happy, and neurotic people experience a fair bit of negative emotion. So that's the positive and negative emotion dimensions. Agreeable people are maternal, and disagreeable people are competitive, and there's a fair bit of male-female difference there. Conscientious people are dutiful and industrious and orderly, and the open people are creative. And so those are your basic 5 dimensions. Okay, so that's been established, and everyone more or less agrees on it. Now, maybe there's 7 dimensions, and we've got a questionnaire that breaks the 5 down into 10. That's called Understand Myself. But basically, there's good consensus on the 5. Okay, so now, as soon as you have the 5 basic traits, you can ask some questions like, well, do men and women differ? And so what you do is you just give the questionnaire. You can either fill it out yourself or have other people fill it out on your behalf. So, and it could be a teacher, it could be a parent, and that's all being done. And what you find is there are systematic differences between men and women. And the biggest differences are that women experience more negative emotion and that they're more agreeable than men.
Nietzsche said that you could tell much about a man's character by how much truth he could tolerate, which is very interesting. There's an idea in the great Western tradition that the truth is the way and the path of life, and that no one comes to the Father except through the truth. And I believe that to be the case, because I don't think that you can manifest who you are without the truth. And so I think it's literally and metaphorically true that the pathway to who you could be if you were completely who you were is through the truth.
I think a lot of that has to do with this concept that men are running everything and that men have this massive advantage. There's a white male advantage and privilege that we all enjoy and share, and that men have this advantage financially. There's disparity in terms of the gender gap in pay, and in income. And that if you were really a good person, you would be trying to balance that out. And that you wouldn't be trying to pump up the winning team.
Right, well, and that's the funny thing. Well, that's it. And that's part of that narrative that, well, if there's winners, there has to be losers. And the reason that there are losers is because there's winners. And that's complete bloody nonsense, because as far as I'm concerned, and I really believe this, is that every single person who sets out to put themselves together ethically is a net positive to everyone around them. There's no downside to that. And my book has been criticized by people who've read it very poorly, especially chapter 1, when I talk about hierarchies, that I'm somehow supporting the idea that power in a hierarchy is the right way to be. And there's absolutely nothing in what I've written that suggests that at all. Like, I'm suggesting that human hierarchies are very complex, and that the way that you win in a human hierarchy is by being competent and reciprocal. And so, I mean, for example, even if you're selfish, let's say, you got to think very carefully about what that would mean if you were selfish and awake, because you have to work to take care of yourself and what you want, say, in this moment. But then there's you tomorrow, and there's you next week, and there's you next month and next year and 10 years from now and when you're old. So because you're self-conscious and because you're aware of the future, you're actually a community unto yourself. And if you're selfish and impulsive, all that means is that you're serving the person you are right now, in that impulsive way, but not the person you're going to be. Well, it's painful to understand how much of what you're doing isn't productive. So I'll give you an example. So I've done this a couple of times with classrooms full of students. Usually when I'm lecturing about career development, say, okay, how much time do you waste? So then I get the class to vote. How many of you waste 10 hours a day? It's like 10% of the kids will put up their hands. And it's interesting because I don't define what constitutes waste. I just ask the question. So they're diagnosing themselves, right? I'm not saying you're wasting 10 hours a day. I'm just asking. It's like, given your own attitude, how much time are you wasting? 10 hours a day. It's like 10% of the people put up their hands. Well, when you get to like 6 hours a day, 80% of the people put up their hands. So then we do the arithmetic. It's like, because I like doing arithmetic with people. People hate arithmetic, but I like doing it. It's like, okay, 6 hours a day. It's 42 hours a week. So let's call that a work week, 40 hours a week. So that's a work week. Let's say, what's your time worth? You're a university student. Well, it's certainly worth minimum wage, because obviously, but it's worth way more than that, because if you spend a productive hour when you're 20, then you gain the benefits of that hour for the rest of your life. So there's the compounding effect of time spent when you're young. So I say, well, let's assume your time's worth $50 an hour, which I think is an underestimate, but whatever. Let's call it 50. We can call it 25, but we'll call it 50. That's $2,000 a week you're wasting. It's $100,000 a year. It's like, how much better would your life be if you weren't wasting $100,000 a year? It's like, what is that over 40 years? $4 million. It's like, you're rich. You don't even know it. Quit wasting time. By your own definition. I'm asking men to be more honest, and especially in their speech and their thinking, and to be more responsible for themselves and for their family and for their community, and to grow up and to shoulder their burden and to live a responsible and meaningful life, and putting those two things together conceptually. And it's like, and then there's an accusation about that as if there's something wrong. And I thought, well, why am I even playing into this? It's like, fine, I'm talking to men. I'm encouraging them. And I am absolutely thrilled. Like every time someone comes up to me, and that's happening, I maybe 100 times a week or something like that, and tells me one of these stories about how they put their life together, it's like, I'm absolutely thrilled about that. And so I don't see, it's just a sign of how pathological our times have become, in some sense, that there would have been any guilt about that to begin with. It's like people shake their heads. Well, I never thought about it that way. It's like, yeah, think about it that way. Don't waste your damn life. And then you think, well, why would people be resistant to that message? It's like, well, you really want to wake up and figure out that you're wasting half your life? And when people do that kind of wasting, they actually hate it. And I've had lots of people come to my clinical practice who were chronic procrastinators, and so they're watching YouTube videos, say, but not ones that are good for them, although sometimes they will do that, but just browsing in that kind of mindless way that you do when you're not paying attention and you're trying to kill time. And people doing that, they feel bad, they get depressed, they feel anxious, they can't get away from it, they feel kind of quasi-addicted.
That's what they're saying about social media now. It's a huge issue with young kids.
Absolutely. But there's this feeling of kind of internal rot and corruption that goes along with it. It's like, yeah, well, you're wasting your life. It's like, so it's painful. It's painful to recognize that. Then it's painful to think, oh my God, look how undisciplined I am. I don't know anything. I can't use a schedule. I can't stick to a calendar. I don't have any aims. I don't know anything about the world, right? And maybe there's a part of me that's bitter because I haven't got everything already. And I'd just like to say, to hell with it. That's the recognition of the Jungian shadow. It's like, that's what makes you vicious and untrustworthy. All of that. No one wants to look at that. And no bloody wonder.